All right, so get this. You wanted to look into U.S.-Ukraine relations, right? Well, buckle up, because we're diving deep into this press conference with Trump and Zelensky.
Oh, wow.
And let me tell you, this is not your average, diplomatic handshake.
Interesting.
This is straight from Sinovision on YouTube.
Okay.
It takes us right into this deal Trump is calling historical.
Historical!
What makes a deal historical?
Right. It certainly makes you wonder what the criteria is for historicals, especially when you consider the context.
Yeah.
We're talking about U.S. investment in Ukraine for rare earth minerals. On the surface, it seems like, both countries could benefit.
Right.
But Trump is really laying it on thick.
Oh, yeah.
Claiming that this will bring peace to Ukraine, even peace to Ukraine through rare earth mineral extraction.
Well, what about Zelensky?
Right.
He seems a little more hesitant.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Like when you compare him to Trump.
He's much more reserved. He's open to the idea of security guarantees, but he doesn't seem quite as sold on the immediate impact. I think that contrast is fascinating.
Yeah, I think so too.
You have Trump, the consummate salesman,
Right.
pushing this win-win narrative.
Of course.
But then you see Zelensky leading a country in a very precarious position.
Right.
Understandably cautious. I think that really speaks volumes about their individual priorities and the pressures they're facing.
Right. And then there's this whole peacemaker angle that Trump keeps pushing.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
constantly reminding everyone how he stopped all these wars.
Right.
But just the way he talks, the way he carries himself,
Yeah.
doesn't exactly scream peace-loving diplomat.
It's a little jarring, right?
Yeah.
On the one hand, you have these impassioned pleas to stop the bloodshed in Ukraine.
Right.
But at the same time, you have this very aggressive, almost dismissive tone.
Yeah.
And then just when you think you have him figured out,
Yeah.
he throws in this unexpected praise for Ukrainian generals and soldiers, acknowledging the really incredibly difficult fight that they're facing.
Okay. Yeah, that part threw me for a loop too.
Yeah.
I mean, is he genuinely committed to peace, or is this more about crafting a legacy and image on the world stage?
It's a question worth pondering, and it becomes even more intriguing when you consider this next bit.
Okay.
The bizarre exchange about Zelensky's attire.
What?
I mean, who would have thought a suit or lack thereof could become a point of contention on the international stage?
I know, right?
Yeah.
He just kept harping on Zelensky for not wearing a suit, even questioning if he owns one.
Wow.
And Zelensky the quick wit,
Yeah.
retorts with this promise to wear a costume after the war, maybe even one like Trump's
Oh, my goodness.
almost comical.
It's funny, but it actually reveals a lot about the power dynamics at play here.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How so?
Trump, by focusing on something as superficial as clothing, is asserting a certain dominance, attempting to put Zelensky on the back foot.
Interesting.
And Zelensky's response, while humorous, also subtly underscores the reality of the situation.
Right.
He's leading a country at war, and fashion choices are understandably not his top priority.
Right.
So is this just a funny anecdote, or is it a sign of a deeper clash, maybe even cultural, that could be impacting the whole negotiation?
Yeah, it really makes you wonder how much weight these small details carry in international relations. It's
Absolutely.
it reminds us that diplomacy is about so much more than policy points and, these formal agreements.
That's it.
It's about personal relationships,
Yeah.
cultural nuances, even fashion choices,
You said it.
all playing a role.
Yeah. And that brings us to the heart of the matter.
Okay.
This fundamental disagreement over how to achieve peace in Ukraine.
Right, because Trump is all about this immediate ceasefire.
Yeah.
That's his big push, his solution. But Zelensky's not having it. He wants solid security guarantees, something that will actually prevent future Russian aggression.
He's thinking long-term.
He's not looking for a pause in the fighting. He wants lasting peace.
Exactly. And his argument makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
He even points to Putin's track record, highlighting how he's broken ceasefires in the past.
Oh, wow.
Zelensky's making the point that simply stopping the shooting isn't enough.
Right.
You have to address the root causes of the conflict, the security concerns that led to this situation in the first place.
So what do you think is Zelensky right to be so insistent on these security guarantees?
I think so.
I mean, is a ceasefire without them just setting the stage for future conflict?
It seems like it.
It's a tough question.
Yeah.
And it gets even more complicated when you factor in Trump's America First stance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is where things start to get really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Because Trump's not just pushing for a ceasefire, he's also taking this opportunity to criticize European allies for not contributing enough.
Financially or militarily.
Exactly, to Ukraine's defense.
And he ties this back to the rare earth deal, claiming that it gives the U.S. leverage and protects American taxpayers. Almost like he's trying to downplay the importance of European involvement, putting America's interests front and center.
Exactly. And this raises a lot of questions about the long-term implications of this America First approach.
Right.
Can you build truly strong and lasting alliances when everything is viewed through this transactional lens?
It makes you think about the bigger picture, right?
Absolutely.
How does this approach to global partnerships impact international stability in the long run?
Right.
And how do other countries perceive this shift in American foreign policy?
There's a lot to unpack.
It's a lot to unpack.
And things are about to get even more heated as this meeting progresses.
Oh, yeah?
Buckle up.
We're talking a full-blown shouting match.
Oh, wow.
You won't believe what happens next.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive to hear all about it.
Picking up where we left off, Zelensky was really adamant about getting those security guarantees.
Right.
He kind of takes it a step further and emphasizes that, any real negotiation has to involve Ukraine and Russia directly. Not just the U.S. calling the shots.
Oh, okay.
He's not just asking for a seat at the table. He's asserting Ukraine's right to be a key player in determining its own future.
Wow.
And he's unwavering in his stance that Ukraine will not compromise its territory.
He said that.
He says very clearly, no compromises with a killer about our territories.
Wow.
And he even brings up this concept of like a rule of war.
Okay.
Arguing that Russia as the aggressor should bear the financial burden of rebuilding Ukraine.
That's a pretty bold statement considering he's talking to the leader of the country providing much of the aid.
Yeah, it almost feels like he's calling Trump's bluff, challenging him to really put his money where his mouth is.
Right.
And it's a stark contrast to Trump's attempt to position himself as this neutral mediator, saying that he's just in the middle and wants to solve the problem for everyone's benefit.
Right.
Zelensky's not letting him get away with that passive stance, directly asking if he truly stands with Ukraine.
Yeah, and remember how Trump kept emphasizing that immediate ceasefire?
Right.
Well, Zelensky pushes back on that too.
He does.
Reminding Trump that during previous administrations,
including Obama's.
Yeah, and even his own first term,
Right.
Putin repeatedly broke those agreements, basically saying we've been down this road before and it hasn't led to lasting peace.
Right.
And this is where the tension really starts to escalate. Zelensky issues this warning that if Russia isn't stopped in Ukraine, they'll push further into Europe.
Targeting the Baltic states?
The Baltic states, maybe even Poland,
Yeah.
even suggests that American soldiers will eventually end up fighting, despite, the oceans separating the continents.
Yeah.
Pretty sobering thought.
It raises the stakes considerably.
Yeah.
And Trump's response is really revealing.
Oh, how so?
Instead of engaging with the substance of Zelensky's concerns, he launches into a series of accusations.
Like what?
Claiming Zelensky is ungrateful, disrespectful,
Really?
downplaying Ukraine's strength
Wow.
by saying they wouldn't have lasted without U.S. support.
It's like he's trying to turn this into a competition.
Yeah.
A measure of who's been more helpful to Ukraine.
Right, and it feeds into this larger narrative he's trying to create.
Like he's the savior.
Exactly.
It's only one who can solve this problem.
The only one.
But his insistence on Zelensky's gratitude just seems to overshadow any genuine attempt to actually address these concerns.
Right. It's a fascinating, albeit messy dynamic.
It really is.
It makes you think about, these complexities of international relations.
Right.
How personal relationships and domestic politics can become so intertwined with these global conflicts.
Absolutely.
And this meeting is a prime example of how those personal dynamics can sometimes derail even the most crucial diplomatic efforts.
Because it's not just about policy disagreements, is it? It's about these two leaders, their personalities, their egos, their perceptions of each other. And all of that is playing out on this global stage with incredibly high stakes.
Right. And it leaves us with so many questions.
Like what?
What happens when those personal relationships between world leaders break down to this level?
Yeah.
How do you even begin to negotiate peace when there's so much animosity and mistrust in the room?
It's a lot to unpack.
It is. And
Yeah.
we'll delve into those questions and more in the final part of our deep dive.
It's clear that the tension is palpable between these two, but despite that, Zelensky keeps bringing it back to the human cost of
Right.
this whole conflict.
Despite the pressure of the situation and this demand for gratitude, he doesn't let the conversation stray too far from the reality on the ground.
Right.
He reminds Trump of the death toll.
Yeah.
The families that are torn apart.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, the children forced to flee their homes.
It's a powerful reminder, isn't it?
Absolutely.
That in the middle of all this, political maneuvering and power plays, there are real people whose lives are being shattered. And what's so striking is how Zelensky just refuses to back down.
He doesn't.
Even when Trump is, getting more and more aggressive.
Exactly. He defends Ukraine's efforts, their resilience. He even challenges Trump directly at one point.
Oh, really?
Saying, you will feel it in the future. God bless, you will not have, don't tell us what we're going to feel.
Wow.
It's a bold statement, and it speaks to the growing rift between them.
It makes me wonder, though, is that kind of confrontation helpful in this setting?
It's a delicate balance.
Yeah.
And I think it depends on the individuals involved.
Okay.
The context, the desired outcome. In this case, it seems like both leaders are just so entrenched in their positions.
Right.
That it's hard to see a path toward genuine understanding.
Yeah, let alone compromise.
Yeah.
And that tension is heightened even more by Trump's focus on the aid that the U.S. has provided.
The financial and military aid.
Right. He constantly reminds Zelensky that he doesn't have the cards without American support. And that message just seems to overshadow any attempt at genuine dialogue.
Right. It's like he's trying to leverage that dependence to his advantage.
Oh, wow.
Using it as a bargaining chip to force Zelensky into concessions.
It really raises questions about, the nature of these alliances.
Absolutely.
And the role of power in these relationships.
Is it about genuine cooperation and shared values, or is it about control? Leverage these transactional relationships.
Right, and how do you even navigate that?
Yeah.
Especially when you're dealing with leaders who have such different personalities.
It's tough.
And approaches to diplomacy.
Well, the meeting ends quite abruptly, actually.
Oh, really?
Trump dismisses the press, basically ending the negotiations on a sour note.
So we're left wondering, what were the consequences of all this?
Right. Did this further damage the relationship between the U.S. and Ukraine?
Yeah.
Did it hinder efforts to find a peaceful resolution?
Those are really tough questions.
They are. And unfortunately, we can't answer them definitively.
But this deep dive has really given us a glimpse into, how complex diplomacy can be.
Absolutely.
Especially on the world stage when you have personalities, domestic politics, and global power dynamics all colliding.
Yeah. It's a reminder that even the best intentions can get derailed by these personal clashes.
Right.
And these conflicting agendas.
What I think is so important is understanding those different motivations and perspectives.
Absolutely.
Of everyone involved.
If there's one thing to take away, I think it's that diplomacy is rarely straightforward.
Yeah.
Seemingly minor details like personal style or perceived gratitude can have huge consequences.
Right.
And, building and maintaining these international relationships in a world full of conflict requires a lot. It requires clear communication, a willingness to listen, and, a shared commitment to actually finding common ground.
Well, there you have it.
There you have it.
A deep dive into a meeting that was anything but diplomatic.
Anything but.
We hope this has given you a better understanding of these intricacies of U.S.-Ukraine relations and how challenging it can be to navigate the global stage.
Yeah.
What stood out to you?
What are your takeaways?
What would you like to explore further?
We encourage you to keep learning, keep questioning, and keep engaging with the world.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.